You are tuned to 90.9 The Bridge. This is Michelle, and I am really excited to introduce you to my special guest today, Michelle Zauner, who performs as Japanese Breakfast. And Japanese Breakfast is gearing up to release their third full-length album, Jubilee, on June 4th via Dead Oceans. And Michelle's memoir, Crying in H Mart, is coming out on April 20th. Thanks so much for joining me today, Michelle.
Thank you for having me, Michelle.
Yeah. We have been playing Be Sweet on the Bridge, and I just want to tell you that song has been stuck in my head in the best way. And we were talking about my puppy offline. I've actually been singing her the chorus to that song when she starts biting me.
That is so sweet.
Yeah, it doesn't work yet. She's still biting me. But,
Please be sweet to me.
Yeah, I think she'll get it one day. But I do want to, for anybody who's listening who isn't familiar with Japanese Breakfast, I'm just going to give you a little rundown of what you've done. So in 2016, you released your debut album, Psychopomp. 2017, you followed that up with Soft Sounds from Another Planet. And Jubilee is going to be your third full-length album. You recently made it Jimmy Fallon big, which comes from one of the songs from 2017. You all performed Be Sweet on Jimmy Fallon just a couple weeks ago, and that was such a cool performance. In addition to that, you are a filmmaker. You've directed a lot of Japanese Breakfast videos, as well as Charlie Bliss, JSOM, Better Oblivion Community Center. You hosted a food show for the Vice channel called Close to Home, which I watched and got really hungry after seeing all those segments. So that was awesome. You've also been working on a video game soundtrack for a game called Sable. And there's also a game on your website called Japanese Breakfast. I don't know how you say it.
Japanese Breakfast.
Breakfast, okay. And then, of course, you are a published writer now, getting ready to come out with your memoir. So you are just this really incredible multi-hyphenate artist. So congratulations on all of the amazing stuff you've been working on.
Thank you so much. It's a lot. It sounds like a lot when you list it that way.
It is a lot. First of all, where are you joining us from today?
I am in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. And you're based in Philly, right?
I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, actually.
Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Okay. I know you were based in Philly.
I was based in Philly up until January 2020, when I began my life in Brooklyn, New York, and 3 months later stayed inside for a very long time.
Of course. And I just saw an announcement today that you're going on tour, and you are going to be coming through Lawrence, Kansas in October, which is pretty close to us. So
yeah, this will be our first time.
Oh, nice. Have you played in Kansas City before?
I don't think so.
Oh man. Okay, well, next time around you should come through Kansas City. Lawrence is only about like 45 minutes from us, but yeah. So yeah, let's get into it. Talk about Jubilee a little bit. So you said that you were ready to embrace joy after writing 2 albums and a book about grief. Your mother passed away from cancer in 2014, and that was a lot of the subject matter of your first 2 albums. So Jubilee is your most buoyant album yet. There's a lot of orchestral elements. I know you brought in a lot of string and horn arrangements, and even the color schemes on the album are very bright and vibrant. It's really such a beautiful, sprawling work that covers this world that your music has lived in for so long, but it seems to bring a lot more to the table. So I'm really enjoying it so far. I can't wait till Bridge listeners can hear it. But the first question I want to ask is about the lead track called Paprika. And I was wondering if that has any reference to the 2006 Japanese anime film.
It does, yeah. I love that Satoshi Kon movie, and when I was working on the arrangement, it sort of builds into it's a very surreal. It starts with a very surreal dream lyrically, and it sort of escalates into this sort of like marching band type chorus. And it just reminded me a lot of the kind of surreal parade scene in that movie. And yeah, I love that movie, and I'm glad that some people are noticing that reference. So yeah, that is definitely what I was referencing.
Awesome. Yeah, so that movie, it's brief synopsis. It's a crazy movie, but it's kind of about a therapist who enters her patient's dreams. And I remember watching it years ago, and that parade scene always stuck with me. but it's a lot about, to me, it's a lot about this duality of escapism, just like living in this vivid dream world and then kind of becoming consumed by it, and then kind of finding this balance between like you can escape into whatever world, but you need to stay kind of grounded. And I think I maybe that's something you've dealt with as far as your grief as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of what Psychopomp was about, honestly. I mean, Psychopomp was this kind of like dream type creature that helps sort of guide the spirits into the afterlife. And I was having a lot of dreams about my mother during that time, and sort of investigating my grief in that way, and it felt like a perfect title. So it's definitely something that I is close to me for sure.
Absolutely. And so I know that you had said that you consciously made an effort to bring more joy into this album. So what was that like, that process?
It was really exciting. I mean, I think that being an artist who has this sort of narrative of being someone that's written a lot about grief and trauma, both in these my last two records and this upcoming memoir, I felt really ready to like sort of close the chapter on that theme. And though, of course, it's not entirely absent on this new album, but I felt really ready to embrace feeling in a new way. I think particularly Soft Sounds was an album that was a lot to do with disassociating. And I feel like with Jubilee, I felt really ready to embrace feeling. I was also thinking a lot about sort of legacy artists and what they brought to the table with their third LP. For me, it was like, I really felt like after making a sophomore record and being so paranoid of experience, like presenting like a sophomore slump, I was really convinced for a while that Psychopomp was just a total fluke and that I was going to ruin everything that I had built with the second record. So for the third album, I definitely felt like I had a lot more confidence and wanted to kind of like flex every muscle and present a really theatrical, bombastic, confident new record. So that's what I was trying for.
Well, I would certainly say that you've succeeded in doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I also wonder if creating this album with that intent kind of helped you process or maybe come to a new place in terms of honoring your mom or honoring your past, or maybe just looking at your relationship from a different lens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the theme is joy, but I would say that, it's different ways of interacting with joy is the real theme. They're not all zippity doo dah happy songs. A lot of the songs are about struggling to feel joy or making space for joy, or like removing yourself from a situation that keeps you from joy. And that was definitely, I had to like give myself a lot of forgiveness to feel a lot of those feelings. And, it's a difficult thing to do, to allow yourself to experience joy, particularly in the wake of loss, because it feels like you should almost never be able to feel that again. And so to claim that felt really right to me in this period of my life, I think.
Yeah, and you've been so very open about your grieving process, which I really appreciate. But one thing that you've been really upfront with is just the fact that grief doesn't necessarily, it doesn't ever really go away. It just changes. And that's kind of how I view this album. Jubilee is a celebration of the passage of time where you honor the past and look forward to the future with hope. So I feel like I'm really hearing it in a lot of these arrangements that you're doing. And I do want to ask, did you come up with the string and brass arrangements?
Me and my co-producer Craig Hendricks both arranged the strings and the brass. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's really incredible. And I do want to touch for a second on that video game development that you've been doing for the game Sable. I know that Jubilee was originally finished in 2019, so I'm not really sure of the timeline here. But so basically, Sable is a story about a character that's coming of age, leaves her family to go explore this vast landscape. So I know the music you've been doing for it is a little more ambient and instrumental. So how much music did you actually compose for the game?
There's about 2 hours of original music on that game.
Okay. I figured it would be quite a process.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I had a lot of time in 2020 to work on it.
Right. that helps. But so when you're writing music for a video game, you want something that pulls people in, but not enough to take them out of that game experience. So how did you balance the two?
It was a very new experience for me, especially being someone who like loves pop music and you know, so much of writing like the Japanese breakfast stuff is about pulling people in immediately and keeping them around. And it was a very different process to, you know, write a lot of ambient, sort of sprawling, you know, longer tracks that don't, take too much of the attention away, or is, you know, can be on a loop and not get obnoxious. So yeah, it was just like a very different experience. It was like a lot of, you know, the maybe both Greg and Dan, the lead designers on Sable, you know, they were really open and letting me explore how I wanted to express the sort of sonic landscape of the game. But the only feedback that I really got was like, maybe more ambient, more ambient. So like, it was just like learning how to do less and less, and then figuring out how to approach music in a totally different way. But it was really fun. You know, there's 3 songs. I believe there's like 32 tracks on the soundtrack, which will be a double LP, and there are 3 songs that have vocals and lyrics on them. And it was really fun to like write from this sort of new voice, this very like kind of objective kind of voice, and it almost reminded me of like how I, you know, I it's almost like writing Disney music. You know, I was really inspired by like a lot of like Joe Hisayashi's soundtracks on Studio Ghibli films, and sort of figuring out how to write lyrics for the, you know, this similarly like very coming of age story that's not about me, you know. So it was fun kind of like working a new muscle and figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, because you're probably accustomed to writing stories from your own point of view. And so I wonder, again, I'm not sure about the timeline, but did that experience have any effect on the making of Jubilee? Or I guess that was maybe after?
I've been working on this soundtrack like on and off since I feel like 2018. So it definitely did. I was like, honestly, like a lot of the like plugins that I bought for Sable, you know, ended up like either getting used or being put on the demos for a lot of the songs. So especially, I think maybe that might have actually helped Jubilee sort of get the arrangements that it did, because I was using, you know, I was working with sort of string plugins and like saxophone and trumpet plugins for the first time, and writing a lot on the keyboard. And so I think getting to have that experience and learning a lot more as a producer with that experience helped me apply some of that to Jubilee. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And you can really hear it on all the different textures in the album, I feel like. So
Thank
that's
you.
awesome to hear. Yeah. And I would love to talk a little bit about crying in H Mart. So I discovered the essay that you published in the New Yorker in 2018. And I just want to tell you from a personal standpoint, it really resonated with me. I'm Asian American as well, and my connection to my mom, she's still with me, but she, you know, it's always been expressed through food, and more so than emotions, you know, in a lot of ways. So that really, it just really, I loved it so much, and I can't wait to read the entire book. But so that essay was the first chapter from the book, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and it's a lot about, of course, losing your mother to cancer in 2014, but also about just forging your Korean American identity and just finding your own identity through cooking that food. So why don't you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I started writing the book, and I guess, you know, very casually started writing about this topic in 2016. And there was another essay called Love, Loss, and Kimchi that was published in Glamour that was largely about my relationship with this Korean YouTube vlogger named Mangchi, who really sort of like helped me, you know, demystified the Korean cooking process, and, you know, was the beginning of me sort of using cooking as this as a sort of therapeutic tool in my grieving process. And so yeah, I started to expand that, and the band went on tour in Asia in winter of 2017, and I stayed in Seoul for 6 weeks writing the sort of beginnings of this memoir, and then the New Yorker published the first chapter, and for the last 2 years I've focused on writing this memoir. But I'm really looking forward to release it. It's very much a mother and daughter story, and sort of about like the clashes that I experienced with my mom as an immigrant parent and, an Asian American kid. And especially as a young creative, that was something that, my mom had a very difficult time accepting for a long time, and sort of how we came back to each other in my 20s and unfortunately had a very sort of heartbreakingly short kind of like good when we were in a good place. I feel like a lot of, not just Asian Americans, but a lot of like teenage girls like go through that, where they sort of have this sort of like point of contention with their parents, and then sort of need to find their space and then come back to them in their 20s, and are able to sort of have this beautiful new relationship with their mom and their as an adult. So yeah, it's a lot about that, and sort of how, for a long time I sort of shirked my Asian American identity as a kind of like it felt like being Asian American for a while felt like a zit almost, like that I wanted to just like ignore and pretend wasn't there. And that was so unfortunate. And it took until like, maybe my 20s to really come back to it and appreciate it in a new way. So the book is also largely about that.
Yeah. And I know that you've said, you studied creative writing, but it took a while for you to write from your own voice, because a lot of the literature you had read, you kind of just started maybe emulating voices you read and didn't think anybody could relate with your experience. But I know, particularly for myself and other Asian Americans, it is so relatable. It's so refreshing to see that story being portrayed so beautifully. But as you said, it's also a universally relatable thing. So I hope everybody will be able to pick that up.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the candor and the humor and the intent and the poetry of how you tell a story. So good job on that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And I know our time is drawing to a close, but I do want to touch a little bit on the Asian American experience, because that comes through a lot in your music. For anyone that doesn't know, Jubilee is also the name of the Chinese American X-Men character.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
One of my best friends is a huge Marvel nerd, and so we grew up playing the X-Men game, and I was like, that's the one, that's my character every time.
That's awesome. I used to work at a comic book shop for a year in Philadelphia, so I'm a big fan of Jubilee.
Yeah, there was Jubilee, and then there was the Power Ranger.
What's that? Yeah, the Yellow Ranger.
Yeah, the yellow. Yeah, which like, thinking back now, okay. But yeah, yeah. But your music also has some influences. I had listened to a podcast where you had mentioned Shin Jun Hyun, Korean guitarist from the 50s.
Yeah.
And I hear that on a couple of the songs in Jubilee too. Where,
yeah,
and it's so cool. But again, you're Korean American, and through your art and stories, you brought a lot of awareness to Asian American Pacific Islander culture. And I know that, in light of recent events and just the past year, and a lot of xenophobia, I know you've said that you're learning to speak from that platform. And I know that from a personal standpoint, I've also been learning to speak from that platform. And I really loved what you said on Twitter after the day after the Atlanta shootings, which was, a terrible tragedy. And it's awful that it took that for people to maybe start paying attention. But you had said something about how we're white adjacent until we're not. And that resonated with me so much. But I'm just wondering, like, what it's like to be put, having to speak from that platform, because, you didn't ask for it. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of representation in music from Asian Americans. So I just wonder how you feel about being put on that stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm learning a lot, not just being an Asian American, but, also a woman in music. Like, I guess it can get irritating in the sense that, like, you want to just focus on your craft and you want to be just seen as an artist. but there's also, you know, this incredible like responsibility and platform that you're gifted with. And, you know, and for me in particular, like I have a very large Asian American demographic that's, you know, and a lot of younger people that sort of look to me as a role model. So I think it's just difficult because I so badly want to be a courageous voice in all of this. I want to know exactly what there is to say and how to direct people towards change. But I'm also not, you know, an experienced activist. I'm not an organizer. And I think a lot of the Asian American community is sort of like reckoning with who our leaders are, because so much of the sort of racism and like microaggressions that we've experienced, I think a lot of us have been sort of trained to ignore or sort of like laugh off, you know, and not take it seriously. And so I think that is slowly changing, and that's a good thing. Like I remember, I believe her name is Yoon Young Jung, who played the grandmother in Minari, was talking about how she didn't understand why so many Americans were having like such a moving experience watching this film. And she came to realize that, you know, a lot of our sort of parents' generation came to this country sort of expecting to be treated poorly, or like have, you know, they have this mentality that, you know, that's something to be expected and to live with. Whereas like a lot of our generation, we grew up here, or a lot of us were born here, and we feel entitled to fair treatment in this way that maybe our parents' generation just felt like they should just stick their head down and that's something that they would have to cope with. And so I think that, you know, I would like to believe that I personally am just going to be more courageous about calling out that type of behavior, and I'm not going to sort of laugh it off or make a joke out of it to make myself feel comfortable. And I think that that's honestly a really new thing. And you know, I'm still learning how to talk about this sort of stuff, but you know, it is definitely something I feel a responsibility to sort of learn how to do, and hopefully we'll just get better at over time. I will say, you know, the only thing, the thing that I think is really important is that there should be consequences for politicians who have, you know, used the type of language that has encouraged this type of behavior. And it's the type of language that we knew was going to sort of breed this sort of hatred and cause these sorts of attacks. And I think that there should absolutely be repercussions for these sort of front-facing politicians who have used that kind of language. Yes.
Yes, I totally 100% agree. And, you know, like for myself too, it's been really hard to just kind of navigate it because it is a new thing. And I think, you know, just the fact that you are able to put your story out there through music and through your book, I think that it's just a wonderful thing because it comes out, it's so authentic, you know, and it's a kind of a window into a world that a lot of people don't see. A lot of times, you know, when Asian Americans are represented, we just kind of get this one narrow view of like, this is what an Asian American is. But it's like, we have so many stories. It's such a broad, diverse culture. So, yes. So I really appreciate you sharing your stories with us. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I just want to tell you, like, from a personal standpoint, I'm really, really stoked to talk to you. Outside of our names, we have a lot of similarities. I also come from mixed race heritage. I'm adopted, but my dad is white and my mom's from Malaysia.
No.
I'm also an only child. I started playing piano when I was 5 years old. I went to school for creative writing.
Oh my gosh, we're the same.
Yeah, so we're pretty much the same person, except I'm also a musician, but nowhere near as awesome. But you know, like I just really love your music, and Crying in H Mart, the essay, just it reminded me of so many things that I treasure about my heritage that I took for granted when I was younger, you know, and as I get older, it's something that I'm really learning to embrace. And the way you put it is just, it's just so beautiful and so authentic. So I just want to thank you so much for providing that to me and probably so many other people out there as well.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That's very lovely to hear. It means a lot to me.
So again, Thanks, Michelle Zauner, for being here. Japanese Breakfast. Jubilee is coming out on June 4th via Dead Oceans, and on April 20th, Crying in H Mart will be out. And she'll also be coming to Lawrence, Kansas on October 9th at the Granada. So thanks so much, Michelle, for taking the time today.
Thank you, Michelle.